Welcome. This is Business Edge. Let's get straight to our headline story. Nigeria's reps seek to restrict a government on agreements, loans, and others. Now, treaties between Nigeria and other subjects of international law do not become domestic laws until they are specifically domesticated, that is, enacted into law by the National Assembly. But the National Assembly has over the years shown little interest in discharging this very important constitutional task. Now, most treaties which Nigeria is a party to have not been domesticated many years after their ratification. In a bid to change this, the current House of Representatives is seeking to repeal the Treaties Act of 2004 and enact the Treaties Act of 2020. How will this play out for the federal government, the National Assembly, and for the country? This is our focus today. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Nigeria's House of Representatives recently held a public hearing on the Treaties Bill 2020, which is seeking to review and amend the Treaties Act of 1993 imposed by the then military junta in power. The bill seeks to revoke the Nigerian laws relating to treaties and agreements and to reenact them in line with the democratic principles as contained in the 1999 Constitution. If the bill becomes law, it will become compulsory for the federal government to seek the approval of the National Assembly and two-thirds of the state houses of assembly during negotiation and after signing international agreements and protocols, as well as contractual agreements and borrowing terms with other countries or organizations. Also, the bill is seeking to repeal the Treaties Act of 2004 and reenact the Treaties Act of 2020. It passed first reading July 21st, 2020, and second reading on September 17th, 2020. Now, the chairman of the Committee on Treaties, Protocols, and Agreements, Nicholas Osai, had sponsored the bill at a time when his committee was reviewing commercial agreements and external loans signed by the federal government on behalf of Nigeria. Osai raised the alarm over dangerous clauses in the loans already taken by Nigeria from China. Now, joining me on Business Edge is Muktar Muhammed. Muktar Muhammed is the CEO of Asher Dynamic Solutions, and he is a regular here on Business Edge. Muktar, good morning, and thank you for joining me once again.
Good morning, Tolulope. It's always my pleasure.
So before we get into what is happening now, let's talk about why countries sign international bilateral treaties, agreements, and the likes. What pushes a country or what motivates a country to look for these agreements to sign?
Well, it depends. Some countries look at their infrastructure. Some countries look at their educational background. Some countries look at their social needs. Some look at their economic needs. So it depends on what you're looking at. But most countries that sign bilateral agreements are looking at what will benefit their people in terms of development. That's the whole idea. And sometimes these things are signed with the purpose of growing a particular sector of the economy. If you talk Nigeria, you look at the rail line, you look at the aviation sector, you look at the agricultural sectors. Those are part of the things that result for bilateral agreement. And some bilateral agreements are not forever. They are bound to be reviewed as time goes on. And sometimes this bilateral agreement also can be suspended and sometimes can even be stopped. So depending on the both parties. But basically, bilateral agreement is all for the good of both parties in terms of economical development. When you look at the economic terms or the other entertainment, in every area of the nation's life, there's a particular bilateral agreement that is always coming into play. But most of the agreement that most countries look up to is the bilateral agreement in the area of trade, investment, and infrastructure.
All right. So according to the representative who sponsored this bill, he says for a while it seems that the National Assembly and the reps, Senate and reps, have been left out of being involved in these situations in terms of negotiation when it comes to loans, agreements, and treaties. Why does it seem that's been the case? Is it them not involving themselves enough, even though they have a constitutional duty to do so? Is it actually the executive arm really trying to sort of push them to the side? What do you think has been happening in this situation?
I think what's been happening is that we've not had a legislation when it comes to that, because the legislation is supposed to be an independent body, but at the end of the day, that became the rubber stamp of of whoever is in power, especially the administration that is in power, especially when the party control the majority in the Senate and in the House of Rep. We saw this play out in the time of President Olusegun Obasanjo. We saw it play out in Shehu Musa Yar'Adua. We saw it play out some area in Goodluck Jonathan term, but it was cut-deep when some members of that party decided to decamp to the then new form APC, and we saw that display during the Senate led by Bukola Saraki, and this was the only time that we saw the legislators stood up and stand up with the administration and said, look, this is what we think is right, this is what we think we should be done. But all this while they have become a rubber stamp of the executive, and that has been a challenge, because whatever the executive sent to them, whatever bill, always pass into law. I mean, one of the representatives was bold enough to say that anything the president brings to the National Assembly was for the betterment of Nigeria, whether we like it or not. So that's why they became a rubber stamp. And I must say that this present Senate is worse in terms of rubber stamping every decision from the executive.
Okay, so let's look at some of those treaties. Now, for example, in the field of intellectual property law, Nigeria has signed several international IP treaties that are yet to be domesticated. There is the WIPO Internet Treaties, made up of the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Performances and Phonographs Treaty. Nigeria is a signatory to several international agreements, but only a fraction of such agreements have actually been domesticated into law. What message, if any, does this send to those who are interested in doing business with Nigeria and those interested in doing business in Nigeria? What message are they getting from our inability to domesticate treaties that we append a signature to, that Nigeria says, you know what, we're good with, we want to be part of this, but somehow when we come back home, we can't make it law?
It shows that we are a nation that maybe we're not serious. I mean, you can't be talking about domesticating an agreement even inside the lifespan of the agreement, because like I always say, you can't change the rule of the game at the middle of the field. You can't be saying that. You have to face what you have to do. You have to do what you have to do to make sure that, and the fact that some of these agreements have even started and before the members are shouting is even worrisome, because I remember some time ago they came up, they were the one that approved the Nigerian loan. Then later on they came back and was saying that they want that loan to be reviewed again. So I think it just boiled down to executive, not the legislators not doing what they ought to do. It's all about politics. When it suits them, when it pays them, it's okay. But when it doesn't, then the Nigerian people suffer, and the executive they try to twist the hands of the executive.
The rationale, as you explained, behind the signing of international treaties is to foster peace, unity, cooperation among member states, and each state is expected to enforce the provisions of these treaties in accordance with the modalities prescribed by their laws. But however, some states, like Nigeria, have devised a scheme of ratifying international agreements without taking the necessary internal steps to ensure the enforcement of their treaty obligations. Meanwhile, they continue to derive various benefits from those multilateral arrangements. We've talked now about how this could affect business, but Muktar, I want us to look at how how this kind of behavior can affect the country's international standing. How does this affect us when others look at us and see us as a country basically finding a way to evade its international obligations?
Definitely, it's not good for the nation. I won't be surprised. Was reading in the papers that the current president of America, Joe Biden, made some phone calls to some leaders in Africa. He has spoken to the president of South Africa. He has spoken to the president of Kenya, and up to this moment, he's yet to speak to the president of Nigeria. And Nigeria is a giant of Africa, the largest economy in Africa. So most of all these things play a role. I'm not saying that's why Joe Biden has not called the president, but I'm not saying it shows the level of seriousness in terms of bilateral agreement, because what you see in Nigeria, the Nigeria just signed an agreement for the sake of signing an agreement. We have a lot of agreement that can go on and tell you agreement that we sign and that are even more or less like slavery to the nation. Like the National Assembly pointed out in your report also, the Nigerian-China agreement, that agreement has not been made public up to this day. They say there's a lot of things included in the agreement that makes Nigeria like if we are actually begging the Chinese for whatever they want. So I mean, it's tough, but that's where we are, because we have people that go to government for the sake of what they can eat, not for what they can give to the people.
We'll definitely get into a conversation with China, because a report from McKinsey said that Africa-China trade has been growing approximately 20% since 2000, and we know how much China has been putting into the continent. So before we get to a break, what is the procedure supposed to be? So what exactly is the role of the National Assembly supposed to be when it comes to Nigeria applying for and eventually signing on the dotted lines when it comes to issues, particularly loans? So Muktar, if you can just briefly give us an idea, what's the process supposed to be? What's the involvement of the National Assembly?
The process have to involve them. The process have to involve them. Even when states are about to take loan, outside loan, especially offshore loan, they are supposed to go to the National Assembly. They must have clearance. Those are the check of balances that we put. But unfortunately, we've not been doing this as a nation, because you need to pass through the National Assembly, because if you don't pay that loan, the country, like if a state like Lagos State is going to borrow a loan from a foreign country, the country itself becomes like the collateral of Lagos State, becomes like the one that will stand as a guarantor for Lagos State. So you need to go to the National Assembly. The National Assembly needs to look at the books to be sure that this state will be able to pay when those loans are when due. But unfortunately, we've not been doing that. I'm talking about states, even state, talk less of federal. So we've seen the president, we've seen the ministers, we've seen governors, we've seen commissioners just go ahead and sign loan based on what they think is right, even without going to the state assembly or the National Assembly. So it's a very dangerous precedent we have set already. It's not that we are set it. We have already set it. And so it may be very difficult for the government to stop it, because it's supposed to be separation of power. It's supposed to be the executive, and it's to be the judiciary, and then you have to also be the parliamentarian arm of government. But unfortunately, they don't seem to flow on that synergy. The executive sometimes control the power of the legislation, and the legislature sometimes want to control the power of the judiciary, and sometimes the legislature even want to control the power of the executive. So it's a big issues. And unfortunately, we're not ready to address that issue. Let me give you a simple issue. In the area of budget, I mean, it's the executive that's supposed to pass the budget. What the National Assembly is supposed to do is to vet that budget and make sure that that budget is implementable. But what we see these days is that the executive passes the budget to the National Assembly. The National Assembly in turn adds something to the budget, not only add, sometimes infuse state-owned project into a federal budget. And they've been doing it for a while. But during the time of, I think, President Goodluck, one of the executive tried to challenge this in court, and by saying, look, let's clarify this issue. But when they went to court, they started the other side of, you can settle out of court. And that's why that issue has not seen the light of day. So we need to know your duty. You need to know you're the executive. They are the one that knows the type of resources they have. You, the legislation, is make sure you come up with, you tend to monitor those projects that are in the budget, not by adding more projects or increasing the scope of the work, because you are not the custodian of the finances. They, the executive, know the finances. That's why they're doing those. So it has been a challenge, and I think this should drag on as far as the Supreme Court, and so that we will have a clear-cut verdict on that position. So this also applies to every other area of the Nigerian country.
Okay, Muktar, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going into the very sensitive, sticky aspect of this. And a lot of people, as we started talking about loans, focus on the loans that Nigeria has been taking out with a debt profile that is over 33 trillion naira already. This is Business Edge. There'll be more right after this. You're still watching Business Edge right here on News Central. My guest, Muktar Muhammed, is still with me. Muktar, before we get into those sticky aspects that involve the loans particularly, I want to take us back to March 2020. The Senate said it was worried about Nigeria's debt profile, which at that time stood at 33 trillion naira. But it was still this same Senate that went on to approve the president's request to get a $22.7 billion loan. So is this all just politics at play? You've mentioned oversights, you've mentioned the executive. Will this not also actually enter into the realm of merging the powers? We're having the three arms of the government, but with this much oversight, will this not affect the executive's ability to independently, of course, go on with its own business?
Tolu, we said it. You said it all with what you said already. It's all about politics. It's all about if the executive arm and the legislative arm are good terms, so anything goes. Like I said before the beginning of this during your program, and I told you how the Senate president said that whatever the president first brings to the Senate will have speedy attention and will be approved because he knows that the president brings everything good for Nigeria, so he doesn't have any right to question it. So it has been like that, and I don't think it's about to change anytime soon. So it's all about politics. It's all about the interests of the party, and sometimes the interests of the people, or sometimes the interests of what people say is a cabal to the detriment of the nation. So I think it's very bad for us, and these things play their way because we have a nation whereby we have people that makes politics like their job. They have to be relevant, and so the only way they can be relevant is to be puppet to the executive arm of government. Mm-hmm. So that is the challenge that we are having. If we have people that are technocrats, we have people that run their own business, people that can be independent of their own self in terms of making decisions, we won't be finding ourselves in such a problem that we are finding ourselves these days.
All right, so let's get into the main points, the sticky issues. So it was the National Assembly, through this same committee that we've been talking about, that actually raised a lot of dust recently on the issue of clauses in some of the loans that Nigeria has taken. So some of the controversy came from Article 8, subsection 1 of a $500 million contract with China that Nigeria took. And so there was something about economic sovereignty that was at play. There are those who have said that the National Assembly, particularly the House of Representatives Committee on Treaties, Protocols and Agreements, apparently misunderstood the issue and then raised the suspicion. There are those who are also worried about this issue of confidentiality, the fact that a lot of the clauses with China particularly are not open to the public. So what has them worried, and are you worried with them?
Yeah, no, I'm not worried. I'm not really worried because I will be worried if the National Assembly have passed it into law, because when we go to international court, when we have issues like you have to back to the international court, and then the international court, we have to look at what the National Assembly have said, because if the National Assembly itself is worried about some of these loans and that they were not part of it, you know, for them to be part of it, it must be passed by 2/3 of the members of the House. It must be gazetted. So we're still very, very safe. In terms of economic sovereignty, every nation is sovereign. So it depends on, you cannot just take a particular nation's sovereignty. We saw the Chinese trying to do it in some African country. It did not work. So it's not going to work in the side of Nigeria also. So that's not where I'm bothered about. I'm bothered about our ways of if we will be able to pay this loan. That is a major challenge.
Yeah, that is. So in terms of the potential of this treaty becoming law, the Treaties Act of 2020, if it becomes laws, can we have a review of previous agreements, previous treaties, and even loans if this new act, the repeal and then the reenactment, actually goes through?
I wish we could, but I don't think so, because like you know, politics will come to play. Let the past be the past. It's always a family affair. So we might not have that. I think they will say, okay, from now henceforth, because some of these treaties, some of these loans are already in place. So you do want to stop them in the middle of what they were meant for. I don't think you want to do that. And like you said, again, it may affect our international relationship, and I don't think we want to do that this time, especially coming out from place like coming out from issue like the pandemic. You want to really have nations that are together, that can flow in the same direction. So you want to hurt your business partner. That for me, I think maybe it's going to be when we are going forward that we'll begin to see this rule, this law that will be passed into law being implemented. But still, I still have my own challenge. I still believe that it will not see the light of the day, because it has to be the executive, and the executive will always have a way around the legislature as long as there's no separation of power.
So even though you believe it may not see the light of day due to issues around separation of power and more, what aspects of the proposed Treaties Act of 2020, if it was to somehow pass, do you think would actually best serve the interests of Nigeria?
I think that has to do with the final approval for any loan comes to the National Assembly. I think that's then it will be open for debate. We need to get the document. We have to have stakeholders. A lot of people will have to contribute. I think for me, that would be the one that will really have a major impact on the people, because if accepted, the people will be interested in what really happened in that project. And so that would be good for Nigeria.
Okay. Muktar Muhammed will end the conversation here. While you're not sure it's going to make the light of day when the next conversation, public hearing, and whatever steps happens regarding the Treaties Act of 2020 will definitely be hitting you up. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Tolulope.
Have a good one. All right, before we wrap things up, let's quickly run you through a few stories we're keeping our eyes on, and that is, of course, NC4 to watch. Now, the Nigerian Senate Public Accounts Committee has berated the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation for paying 443 billion naira without the National Assembly's appropriation. The chairman of the committee has summoned the management of the NNPC to explain the expenditure it made without budgetary provision. What is it without permission? Uganda Airlines has secured departure and landing slots at the busy London Heathrow and Dubai International Airport as it prepares for commencement of long-haul flights to the UK, the United Arab Emirates, and China. This comes after the airline received its 2 Airbus aircraft in December 2020 and last month. Roger Wamala, the Uganda Airlines commercial director, says the 2 aircraft will, however, remain grounded because the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority has not yet cleared them to fly. That is expected to happen around the end of April. Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed financial services group Momentum Metropolitan has disclosed that while its operating performance continued to improve over the last 6 months ending December 2020, earnings were lower due to COVID-19. Earnings were dampened by the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, and normalized headline earnings of 1.012 million rand, which is down from about 43% compared to the previous half year ended December 2019. However, there is some significant recovery coming. And finally, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has directed for the maximization of the country's assets, including land and coast, and their preservation as national wealth. He was speaking with the Prime Minister to follow up on the general strategy for tourism development throughout the country, and this comes as part of the framework for the optimal exploitation of the state's assets for exploitation. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Head to our website. And of course, don't forget you can go to YouTube if you've missed any of our conversations on business and financial stories from here on the continent. Download our app and take us with you wherever you go. Until next time, I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun.